You can see a list of these events if you go to our website, govtx.com. Choose the FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the page. Scroll down just a bit and look for that webinars link. Choose that. This will carry you to the webinar page where you can sign up for the newsletter to be notified of upcoming webinars and other FasTrax news, as well as a list of all of our upcoming webinars that you can register for and previous webinars where you can view the recording. Now today we're going to be going over a topic that's very important for inventory control, cycle counts. Cycle counts is the verbiage that we would use when it comes to counting your store, counting your inventory. Gone are the days of where you have to shut the store down, count the entire store, verify your count, apply it, then reopen the store. With cycle counts, you can break those inventories down into much smaller chunks, whether it be specific items, whether it be groups of items by like department or categorization, much more manageable counts. Do those while the store is actually open, and the system will know if there's sales that occur, if there's breakdowns that occur, if there's invoices that are applied, if there's transfers or adjustments done, all in real time. So we're going to take a look at this. We're going to go into Director first. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to actually create a definition. Now the definition, this is going to be what we're expected to count. So I'm going to go to the Inventory module. I'm going to go to the Inventory tab, and finally the Inventory definitions. This will show a list of the definitions that I've already got. If I need to build a new definition, I can choose the New Definition button, and then I can give this a name. What do I want to identify this inventory definition by? And then I have my filter. What items do I actually want to count in this inventory? And there's a ton of different filters. Anything that says filter by, that's going to be basically set by an item's parameter. So what department is that item assigned to? What product group is that item a part of? What major category is that item a part of? Whenever you're choosing one of those, let's say I'm doing by major category, if I choose my beer and wine, then whenever I start and count this inventory definition via a cycle count, it's only expecting me to count any item that is in that major category of beer and wine. If the item is not a part of the beer and wine major category, it's not expected to be counted, and I can't count it. It's not going to allow me to count that. Now, on that same note, when I say it expects me to count those items, that means that if there's an item that is a part of that definition, and I don't count it, and the system has inventory on that item, well, since I didn't count it, and if I apply that, that means the system says, well, hey, I've got something, you didn't count it, that means you obviously don't have it. So it will remove that inventory. That's a very important thing to remember. So whenever you're doing your counts, you always want to make sure that before you apply that count, every item that is a part of that definition, you actually make sure that if it's in the store anywhere, you count it. Because if you don't, then it's going to set that quantity to 0, regardless of what the current quantity on hand is. And that goes both ways. If I have an item that is -5 on hand, the system knows you can't have something that's -5. So if you don't count it, it's going to add 5 to that definition. It's going to add 5 to your on hand via that definition. So it's going to be adding inventory, a positive variance to your store's inventory. Now, back on the definition on our filters, there's that wide variety of filters you can set. There's also some dynamic filters, and that's going to be based on current inventory levels, negative transactions, sales, things like that. Now, if I do the filter by, let's say, all items with a negative quantity on hand, it does exactly that. The only items that's going to be expected to count in this definition whenever I start this count is items that have a quantity on hand equal to less than 0. So this is a good definition that can be short to make sure that my inventory is right on items that inventory levels are obviously very wrong, because I can't have negative of something. Another example would be random items in any department or a single department. It's exactly that. I can do a count that's based on this. I would choose my departments that I want to use, the number of items I want to count, and it's just going to be random items in any single department. If I do random items in one department, I can put in the number of items I want to count. It could be 25. I can choose a single department, and then it's going to choose randomly 25 items in that single department. You can do the top selling items for all departments, basically the top selling items in your store, the top selling items in a single department. This is a very popular one, items from negative transactions. What this is let's say I put in 7 here. Any item that is classified as a negative transaction in the system, and that's a void, a cancel, a no sell, or a return. Any item that is a part of that criteria on that transaction, it's going to expect me to count. So this is a good way to stay on top of potential shrink, because anything that has a negative item, a negative transaction, it's part of that, you want to pay extra close attention to those items. There's the all items from negative transactions. There is the inactive items. That's items that are discontinued. And then there's a new feature called filter by custom filter. And this is going to be where you create a custom filter to filter by. Now what that is that's going to be that custom filter option in mass updates. So let's jump to mass updates really fast. I'm going to go to my price book, my mass updates. I'm going to go to my filters here, and it's going to be this custom filter option. Now I don't have anything built here, but you can do the manage filter option, and you can build a filter. So I can say new filter, I can give it a name. This filter by dropdown allows me to set multiple parameters to get very specific items in place. An example could be, I want to filter by Winston's, but only cartons. Normally, whenever I filter, I would see both cartons and packs on that product group. However, I could put the filter by product group Winston and major category of full price carton to get exactly what I'm looking for, only Winston cartons. Looking at the tree view here, the way the price book is set up, I have full price carton and full price packs as my categories. If I did a definition based on the product group Winston, it would include both. But using that custom filter, I could say with a category equal to full price carton and a product group equal to Winston, I could only filter to just that group of items. So let's go back to our inventory definitions here. And I'm going to just edit this one here. And that's all the definition options. Now, when it comes to inventory definitions, if you are in a corporate multi-store environment, you want to make sure that the definitions are created at corporate, not at store level. You want to treat this just like a regular item. So you build your definition at corporate, you send that definition down via the queue to the stores. This way, everybody's on the same page. All definitions are exactly the same at every location. Now, if you're in a single store environment, you can create a definition at store level. You can do that via director, or you have the option of doing that via point of sale. So I'm going to open the point of sale here. I'm going to go to my actions. I'm going to go to my inventory, and then here's the manage definitions. And I'm going to see the same definitions here. I can edit those, I can create a new definition, and then I have the same thing. Give it a name, and I have all my options. So just remember, if you're in a corporate multi-store environment, you want to make sure that the definitions are created only at corporate, not at store level. If you're not a part of a corporate multi-store environment, then it's okay to create definitions at store level. And if that's the case, you can also create them using the point of sale. Now let's go back to director here. There's one other thing we can look at. We can look at the print details. This is also a newer option. Whenever I print the details here, it's going to print out what items are actually on this count. So I can now see what items are expected to be counted anytime I do a cycle count utilizing this definition. All right, so that covers the definitions. Now let's go to the cycle counts tab here. This screen here will allow us to see all cycle counts that are done between this date range. Now I can filter to individual, like all counts, open counts, or finish counts. I can filter to individual definitions. Anytime I make a change to any of these filters up here, though, I have to choose the refresh button, and that would repopulate this grid down here. Now, let's go over starting a cycle count. Now, to start a count, I can do it via the director, point of sale, or the handheld. So let's say I want to start my cigarettes count. I've got that definition selected here. I can choose start. It's going to ask, am I sure I want to start? I'll choose yes. And then it's going to go over and it's going to add all these items that are a part of that definition into this cycle count. Once this is finished, it's then going to be viewable on the handheld. Now I can also, and more commonly what I see, is start this on the handheld. Now if I go to the handheld here, I'm going to log in. Once it finishes validating, it's actually loading another cycle count, so it's going to go a little slower right now. But once it's finished validating, I would choose the cycle counts module. Now, once again, these modules, they're going to be based on permissions. So if you're unsure of what permissions are required for the handheld, there is a handheld video and a FasTrax permissions webinar video you can watch, and then I'll go over that in detail. So I'm going to choose the cycle count option here because this user does have permission to do cycle counts. We can see that cycle count that I've already started in Director for cigarettes. If I want to start a new one, I just choose the red plus button, and then I can choose Jewel or Full Store, my other two definitions. Now notice the cigarettes definition is not there. The reason for that is that if there's a cycle count that's actually open at store level utilizing a definition, you can't start a new cycle count using that same definition at that same location until the first one is complete. The system does not allow for that. So if you needed to, say this is an old count, I never finished it, I would either need to finish this count or delete that count before it's applied, and then I can start a new cigarettes count. That's just a rule of thumb, is you can't have two open counts of the same definition at any given time. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start my Jewel definition here. There's my prompt. I'm not sure I want to do this. I'll choose yes. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to start that count. Now while we're in the handheld, we're going to go over the handheld features. So there's two modes you can see at the top. There's the backroom mode and the floor mode. And those handle the count very differently. So the backroom, that's by default first. That's selected first. Whenever you count an item in the backroom mode, it's going to do the snapshot. We'll go over the worksheet and what a snapshot is here momentarily. And it's going, whenever you do the counts there, it's going to expect you to actually count based on items that are not moving. Let me reconnect in because the window just closed on me. It's going to expect those inventory levels to not move at all in the backroom mode. So that means I can't pull from the backroom inventory. I can't add to the backroom inventory. That's a static amount. Once it's been counted, that's final. It can't move. Now, if I go to the floor mode, notice I'll choose that. It lights up blue. That's where that's handled differently. In the backroom, another example of it being static is that the item is expected to be in one singular location. In the floor count, none of that really matters. If I scan an item in the floor mode, then the item can be pulled from the shelf and sold. The item can be in multiple locations. There can be product moving due to inventory, like an invoice being applied, a credit invoice being applied, transfers, adjustments, whatever the case may be. The floor mode is going to take that into account whenever you scan the item and after you scan the item, that item movement. So that's just a good rule of thumb to remember. Anytime you're doing a cycle count, if there's potential for that particular item to move, whether it be in the backroom mode or whether it be in like the backroom or not. You may prefer just to use the floor mode, because if you can't be certain that that item will not move, then it's better just to be in floor modes to take that into account if it does indeed move. So adding items to the count, you can do that via the item search by searching by UPC. You can do that via the camera, or you can do that via a barcode scanner. This screen here will also show items that have been counted on this cycle count, as in scanned. Alternatively, I can flip the screen, it'll rotate the view, and I can see items that are expected to be counted in addition to that in that far right column. Now on the red cogwheel here, there's going to be settings. If I choose that, I'm going to have a couple of different settings here. So that first one is the always scan one. If I choose this, I can enable that or disable that. What that does is if I have that enabled, every time I enter an item on this cycle count, it's adding 1. It's appending 1 to that count. If I have that set to disabled, not toggled on, then whenever I scan an item, I'm going to be prompted to enter the quantity of that item. So if I scan one item, I can enter in 5, and that adds 5 to the cycle count. Alternatively, if I scan that item again after entering it in the first time, instead of just automatically adding 1, it's going to prompt me saying, hey, you've already scanned this item. Do you want to replace your old count, or do you want to append to the new count? And then you enter in your quantity. Replace, of course, being erasing everything you counted up to that point for that item, and then replacing it with the new quantity entered. And the append just adds to what was previously counted. There's the rescan prompt enabled. If I have that set to enabled, I'm going to get that dialog box. If I have that set to always scan one, is disabled. If I scan it again, I'm going to get that prompt saying, hey, you've already scanned this. Do you want to append or replace? There's the backroom snapshot enabled. That's something you would want to use, especially if you're doing backroom count, because whenever you scan that backroom item, you want it to take a snapshot of that inventory. Then there's the show count history. If I see that, I can see only the last recent item scanned. On my filter, I can show only items that I have scanned, and then I can show all scan history. Now that show my scan history, that is used because you can have multiple handhelds simultaneously counting at the same time. So I can have 1, 2, 10 different handhelds scanning the same store using the same definition, and everything will be perfectly fine. Now, if one person scans an item and another person scans the item, it's going to do that prompt as long as it's enabled, the rescan prompt saying, hey, this has already been scanned. So generally, if you're doing that, you're going to have employees doing specific products or specific sections of the store. And then finally, there's the uncounted options, and that will show you essentially this item here, items that have, when the screen rotates, it'll show you items that have not been counted, that are expected to be counted. All right, so whenever you're done using your cycle count, just simply choose the back button, and you'll do everything else from either point of sale or director. So there's one other definition type I want to talk about, and that is going to be when you choose the plus here. Notice there is a no def in the bottom right corner. Now, whenever I choose this, whenever I flip the screen over, you can see there is no expected items. That's because a no definition is really more of a dynamic, kind of a spot check type count. There's nothing expected to be counted, so what I scan is the only thing that's going to be expected. So in this case, I could put in any item, because it doesn't have, there's no filter here. I can put in any item. Let's say I'm putting in 10 here. And it's going to add 10 to that count. Now, just so everyone can see that rescan prompt, if I put in the same item again, let's say I'm putting in 4 here. There's the prompt. This item's been rescanned. Do I want to replace, basically replacing that 10 with the 4 that I just put, or do I want to append, adding 4 to that? I'm just going to do the append. Now notice that counts up to 14. Now let's take a look at the actual worksheets. We've gone over the handheld. So whenever I'm done counting, I can just back out of this. And we're going to go to Director now. I'm going to refresh my screen there because there's the definitions that I've started. I started 2 other ones in the handheld. And in this case, I'm going to choose the no definition. I'm going to view that worksheet. And this is going to be the worksheet that you see. So you're going to have your UPC, your description. You have this counted and scanned. Now, the counted and scanned, if you count it in any way on the handheld, then the checkbox for both of these are going to be applied. If you count this via what's called the user-adjusted count, which we'll go over just in a moment, then only the counted checkbox will be in place, not the scanned. Now there's your backroom count, so whatever quantity you counted in the backroom will be visible here. There's the floor count. Anything that's been counted on the floor, you'll see that number here. The user-adjusted count, this is a way to append to the sum of these 2 items. So let's say that I want to remove 2 from this count, 2 from that floor count. I can put in -2, and that will remove 2, bringing my total count to 12. So that total count, of course, is going to be the sum of these 3 fields. Then I'm going to see the quantity sold field. So after I scan this item, how many times was it sold via transaction? I'm going to see a breakdown quantity. That would be where if I have 0 on hand of a pack, I've already scanned that carton and pack. It goes out the door. It's going to then do a breakdown from the carton, taking 1 from the carton and adding 10 to the pack. So you're going to see that on the carton level there, -1, and on the pack level, you'd see a +10. Then you have your adjusted total count. That would be the sum of all of these values here. Now your snapshot quantity, that's going to be at the time of scanning the item in the count. What did the system think that you have on hand? Your adjusted snapshot count, that's going to be the snapshot quantity minus that quantity sold, breakdowns, invoices, adjustments, transfers, etc. It's going to adjust that dynamically based on what's occurred since you scanned the item. Then you have your variance count. The variance is going to be what does the system think I should have had versus what did I actually physically count. So basically my adjusted snapshot count compared to my adjusted total count. What's the difference there? Then you have your variance dollars. Is there a positive variance? Am I over? Or is there a negative variance? Am I short? Then there's some filters at the top of the screen here. By default, it's going to be showing all items. We can do the counted items, so items that have only been counted. That would filter out anything in this definition that has not been counted. So let's go to a definition that we could better see that. Let's say that I put in a count here. And I'm going to refresh that. Notice the scanned column, the checkbox is not checked because I only did a user-adjusted count. So the system's going to let me know that I didn't physically scan this. I'm just adjusting it manually via that user-adjusted count field. So if I go to my counted, I'm only going to see that one item. It's filtering everything else out. If I go to my uncounted items, then I'm only going to see items that have not been counted. These are items that, once again, as I said before, are expected to be counted. So regardless of my inventory levels, if I don't count these and I save this count, it's going to set those quantity on hand values to 0, regardless of what they are, negative or positive. Then I can see items with a variance, and only items with a variance, regardless of whether they've been counted or not. And that would be items that have a variance count and variance dollars. Next, there's the roll-up view checkbox. And this is a very handy feature, especially like when you're counting items with purchase unit subunits, cartons and packs, for example. An example I'm going to give here is, let's say that we have, on our count, we have 2 variance items, a carton and a pack. And those 2 items are linked together. Let's say that I'm -1 on the carton and +10 on the pack. Well, if I'm looking at it on this view, items with a variance, I'm going to see both of those items. They both have a variance, -1 and +10. However, if I choose the roll-up checkbox, due to those items being linked, they're going to roll up together and then they're going to vanish, because in that particular scenario, if you're over 10 packs and short 1 carton, it's a wash. You're not short anything in reality because those two items are linked together. So one important thing to note also, whenever you're done with your cycle count, whenever you're ready to apply this to inventory, one of the most important things to do would be to choose this Refresh Quantity Sold button. It does much more than just the quantity sold. It will refresh new scans, it will refresh inventory, like inventory adjustments, inventory transfers, invoices being applied, credit invoices being applied, whatever the case may be. It's going to look at all of those potential movements on the items that's in this definition, take that into consideration, and then update the worksheet. Because if I'm sitting here on this page right now and another action occurs in the background, whether it be someone else counting, invoice, whatever that case may be, this page isn't changing. It's already loaded. It's loaded based on my historical counts, my historical activities. So if I want the most up-to-date information, I need to choose that Refresh Quantity Sold button. And that's basically a refresh for everything. So if I did not do that, if I did not press that button, and then I choose the Save button, and other activities have occurred on items that are in this count, then my inventory count that's being applied could potentially be wrong. If I had an invoice that was applied before I hit the Save button and I didn't hit that refresh, then I'm going to basically remove all the items on that invoice that was just applied. So always remember to choose that Refresh Quantity Sold button. One other option is the Set Uncounted to Expected Quantity. Now this would be a button that ideally shouldn't be used often. It's more so like, hey, I've got this count that I'm doing, I ran out of time, I can't scan everything. What it does, when you press it, you're going to get a prompt to put in your password. You're going to put in the password, choose OK, you get this prompt here, set unexpected items quantity to expected quantity. What it does when you do this is it's going to effectively, quote unquote, count everything. And whatever the system expects that value to be, whatever the system thinks the item quantity in hand was, it's going to put that as your count. So it's just a quick way to make everything balance. There's going to be no variance whenever you press this on items that have not been counted. When you're done, you can choose the Save Reconcile button, and that will save that count, updating inventory levels. So at this point, this count can no longer be removed. We can see that it's actually finished. We can see there is a positive variance. So at this point, my inventory level on that item that I counted is now changed. Every item in this definition, if there was counts on there, if I counted something differently on any item in this definition than what the system originally thought it was, those are going to be changed now. So that covers the cycle counts and how you start the definitions, create the definitions, do the count, review the worksheet, and apply the count. Next, we want to look at some of the permissions involved. Of course, whenever I'm looking at this worksheet, I had full permission to see what I was expected to have. And if there was a variance, I knew about that variance. Well, there could be situations where the person counting, they don't need to know that information. A potential example of shrink could be, I'm counting inventory, I count 12 packs of an item. The system lets me know that I was only expected to have 9 packs. Well, I could change my count and put in 9 and then pocket those 3. If that's a potential situation, you want to make sure that the counters don't have access to know what they're actually counting, what the system expected values actually are. And that's a permission that's called the blind permission. So we're going to go to our maintenance module here, and we're going to go to the Employees tab. Now, all the permissions we're going to look at in the employees area is also available in the user groups. You can, of course, assign an employee to a user group, and that employee inherits all permissions associated to that user group. I'm going to open the manager employee up here, and we're going to look at these two there in relation to cycle counts, the cycle count blind and the cycle count read only. So the blind here, if I have the blind set on the director general permissions, that prevents me from seeing what the system expects me to have, the snapshot quantity, and variances on the cycle count worksheet. So what we were just viewing, where we can review what's happened on the handheld. If I have that set to blind, I can't actually see what I was supposed to have, snapshot quantity, and my variance. If I have the cycle count read only option, that lets me open the cycle count up. I can view the worksheet, but that save button is going to be grayed out. If I have that set to read only, that means I, as the employee, can't actually apply that cycle count inventory. So if there's a chance of someone that doesn't need to have that permission to update inventory levels, they can just maybe view potential variances and then research those. You don't want to have that turned on. That way, only specific personnel can actually update and alter your inventory levels. And then under POS permission or handheld permissions, we have the actual specific handheld permissions. I have the cycle count permission here. This turns that module on and off on the handheld. So if I have that set to not true, then once the user logs into the handheld, they don't have the option to even do a cycle count. If that's turned on, then I have the option to do a couple of these other options here. Hide cost. If that's turned on, then whenever I scan an item, I'm not going to see that item's cost. I won't see its value. And then there's the cycle count blind. If I have that turned on, then whenever you scan the item on the handheld, it's not going to tell you what the system expects you to have. So this is going to be preventing that snapshot quantity from being visible on the handheld level, on the person actually physically counting the inventory. So you'd want to set your settings up beforehand and then make sure you choose save. And then at that point, all those employees that have those permissions, whether it be individually or part of a user group, they're going to have the applicable correct permissions when doing cycle counts. Okay, so I hope everybody learned something new today. Once again, our webinars, they happen every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can see a list of these if you go to our website, goftx.com. Choose that FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the page. Scroll down just a bit and look for that webinar button. And this page will let you sign up for the newsletter to be notified of upcoming webinars, as well as upcoming FasTrax news, and then the registration for upcoming webinars and reviewing videos of the previous webinars. If you have any questions on this topic, feel free to let us know at websupport@FasTraxPOS.com. And if you have any suggestions for future webinar topics, let us know at info@goftx.com. Thank you, and have a great weekend.